Hi, welcome back to Divinity Said. Today we're going to talk about the motions hearing from today, February 18th, in the Karen Reed case. It looks like Elizabeth Little is the attorney who's arguing this. Let's listen into what they had to say.
It deals with an interview conducted by two material witnesses in our case, Lieutenant Fanning and Trooper Kathleen Prince, and we're simply asking for an unredacted copy of that report.
Okay.
As to request 3, we're asking for an unredacted copy of public record responses regarding email correspondence and communications associated with the Sandra Birchmore investigation. The communications we've received in our case have been revelatory, material, and exculpatory. Given the consistency and parallel type of investigation, the communications between and among law enforcement officers and the Norfolk County DA's office with witnesses who are material to our case are relevant and should be turned over in discovery. Finally, we've also asked for an unredacted copy of all reports, communications, and handwritten notes and other documents from the Sandra Birchmore investigation concerning material law enforcement witnesses in our case. Your Honor, the reports by investigating officers that led to the improper clearing of Peace Officer Matthew Farwell in the Birchmore case go directly to the credibility of those law enforcement officers and their reports. The reports that they drafted in reaching certain conclusions, clearing Officer Farwell, directly go to their credibility in our case, which again, deals with the clearing of a fellow officer. And I would cite one example, Your Honor. For example, Massachusetts State Police Trooper Garino, the same person who obtained and analyzed the electronic devices in our case and reached certain opinions and conclusions, also analyzed electronic data in the Birchmore investigation. As it turns out, Trooper Garino made certain ultimate conclusions in at least one of his reports, stating that really there's nothing to see here. I found some text messages. They corroborate that Matthew Farwell had a consensual relationship with Sandra Birchmore. No evidence of improper conduct, nothing to see here. Yet, when the federal investigators looked at the electronic data, they recovered tens of thousands of text messages between Birchmore and Farwell that implicated Farwell in her murder. The text messages, which are publicly available and referenced in federal search warrants, affidavits, are incredibly disturbing. They establish that he had sex with her as a minor when she was a cadet in the Stoughton Explorers program. They detail violent fantasies. It's clearly implicates Matthew Farwell. It's not even a close call. Is it relevant and material to us that the same expert would analyze a fellow officer's electronic devices and make those types of conclusions? Of course it is. This information goes directly to Garino's credibility, bias, competency, and ability to conduct an investigation in this case, where there were law enforcement officers who should have been suspects. As to request number 5, Your Honor, we're asking for documents related to the internal affairs investigation into Trooper Michael Proctor.
Report and have all the information that we have. It's odd that it's important during argument to mention that there's an ongoing federal investigation and then list a number of witnesses for the Commonwealth, implying somehow something's nefarious, that these witnesses are involved in this other controversial case that has nothing to do with this case that the defense would like to parasite onto. And so they just throw out terms and words for our audience that's here on our right to try to create an illusion of impropriety. There is nothing that they have provided about the Birchmore case that will provide a basis for the Commonwealth to now go scramble and search for information that there's no good faith actually exists. It's easy to throw out a name and attach it to the Birchmore case, troopers, the DA, malign their name the way they know how to do. But when you're arguing a discovery motion, there must be a factual basis for it, a factual basis, a good faith basis. We hear the defense say that Trooper Garino says, nothing to see here. I have not seen that report where Trooper Guarino says nothing to see here. I don't know what report they're speaking about when they suggest Trooper Guarino had done something wrong in a different case. They imply it. They're suggesting that's the basis for you to compel discovery on a case that has nothing to do with Miss Reed's case. They just say it. And so you should reject outright an argument that tries to imply impropriety when there is none, with no factual basis or good faith basis, because they want to entertain our audience. And so the reality is the Birchmore case is being investigated by federal authorities. There's been a number of disclosures by the Commonwealth for information that has been public record. And there is no good faith basis that there is something in that case that is relevant in any way to this case. Ms. Birchmore was a victim.
Of who? It's such a dumb way to end. He does end it there.
Number 4.
He ends that point there with Miss Birchmore was a victim. ... The ... would be of the police covering for each other. Because originally her death was ruled a suicide because of the officer, Link, who was the first responding officer, same first responding officer to a different cop's house where John O'Keefe was found. The fact that they do not investigate each other as officers under the same quilt is a huge problem, and clearly a problem that Karen Reed's defense wants to look at. Since light has been shown on Sandra Birchmore's apparent suicide, I'm pretty sure the medical examiner has, or a medical examiner has come out and said that this isn't suicide. I'm pretty sure the case was reopened for a reinvestigation because the cops who looked at it literally just covered for each other, when clearly the last person to see Sandra Birchmore alive was the police officer that she had been having an affair with her since she was a young teenager, which Guarino didn't even bother to find when he investigated and went through his text messages. It's unbelievable that someone could die in the presence of police and the police are above question on how they handled it. I can't understand how he doesn't see it, but as I showed you in my last video with the ARCA questions, he didn't watch the last trial and he has no idea about what's happening with Sandra. I did do a video on why Sandra Birchmore is important here. Really quick, I'm just going to say Sandra Birchmore was molested and abused and taken advantage of by police officers in the next city over from them, like 10 minutes. We're talking a stone's throw away from them. She lived in Canton. So when she got murdered in her apartment, Canton PD shows up. Okay? John O'Keefe in the Canton house, hanging out with them. The difference between John O'Keefe and the police officers he's hanging out with is that John O'Keefe works sex crimes divisions. So in my opinion, John O'Keefe probably had an eye on these people that were being investigated or at least talked about in circles for having something to do with the Birchmore case. And then he's silenced forever. But there's nothing to see here. It's just, that's Karen doing it. Nothing to do with the cops that weren't questioned, the first responder that never went outside while he had, first of all, his friend dead on his lawn, his sister coming in to say that there's problems. I mean, so many things. There are so many incongruencies in this whole investigation. To say that Sandra Birchmore doesn't tie in is to just piss on her grave. It makes no sense. I believe that it has something to do with this because, like Miss Little said, these are the same officers that were trusting in investigating other officers in this case. And as you know, if you saw any of the first case, the first trial, they weren't even questioned. They just weren't. Until they got on the stand, did they finally get to answer for their bullshit. And we learned a lot. We learned that they went drinking together in their squad cars, lost their service weapon. Like, these are the cops. Inadequate probably is the most inadequate word I can think of to describe them. I don't know if Beverly is going to let any of this stuff in. Her track record says that she won't, but I do have faith. Speaking of faith, if you guys want to come hang out at a Bible study, I do it every Saturday at 7 a.m. In the meantime, I will be covering a little bit of the Sandra Birchmore, Karen Reed stuff. And at this current moment, it is the plan to stream the trial. It starts April 1st. It's a lot of work. So subscribe. We'll see where we get. And share this with a friend if you think that they would be interested. I also have a video on my channel breaking down the entire Sandra Birchmore thing. You should watch it if you're interested to see where this is going. We will be back in court next week, the 25th, I believe. Yep, Tuesday the 25th, to find out really where all the ARCA stuff and where all these motions are going. So stay tuned. I'll keep you posted. Take care.